Life Management Science Labs would like to acknowledge that we live and produce this podcast on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people. We'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands of our listeners and our international colleagues. We'd like to pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. Hi, and welcome to Self-Improvement Atlas, the Personal Science Insights podcast produced by LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. We are champions of life management science, providing structured insights informed by science and inspired by practice on key aspects of conscious living. Each week, we bring you scientific and practical insights on each element with the expert knowledge of professionals in the field. I'm Marie Stella, your host from Melbourne, Australia. Let's start the show.
Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode. I'm your host today, Dina Sargeant. Now, what does your sleep hygiene look like? Well, apparently different elements of a night routine can elevate your sleep quality. Joining me to hopefully guide us into a better sleeping habit is certified sleep science coach and the founder of Sleep Fitness Coach, Nick Stewart. Thank you so much for joining me, Nick.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Dina.
Now, we have a lot of conversations prior to recording, and we've also had previous conversations about a week ago sort of talking about the topic today, and there is a whole lot of backstory that sort of goes into how you got into talking about this and how you got into wanting to be a coach in sleep fitness.
Yeah.
So what was the pivotal point that your own journey with sleep became the focus of the work that you're doing now?
Well, one thing that I didn't mention prior to us planning this is that actually I spent 4 years as a full-time trainer and coach for young adults 18 to 24 who came from violent backgrounds, who wanted to earn Fortune 500 internships. Mm-hmm. And so I was coaching young adults who were trying to get the one seat at Google or whatever. Long story short, that's actually when I started sleep coaching. I just, like, the term didn't exist. The idea didn't exist. I just would have one of my coaching adults come into the group and look like death. And I'd be like, everyone get out. Dina, stay here. Mm-hmm. And then we'd start a coaching session and we'd figure out really quickly, like, you've shrunken your sleep time so badly that your parents found you dead, knocked out on the linoleum floor when they came home. Like, if we don't start working on your sleep first and get that straight, the manager who decides that you go to Google is already questioning whether she should send you. So mm-hmm. What was amazing was that I had multiple high performers, and in each case of them, it started with working on sleep.
Wow.
And so then I got recruited to the communications department, which is basically like English. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure if this works the same way in Australia as it does here in the US, but like teachers have discretion over what the reading assignment is. But we're like, Dina, we expect you to write an essay response with an introduction, 2 paragraphs, and a conclusion based on this reading. But the teacher can pick what the reading is. It's not like mandated.
Okay.
So I started sneaking in readings that I'd find on sleep to influence all 40 of the young adults at a time. And then it wasn't years later that we get to where you're asking about.
Oh, wow.
So strangely, I did sleep coaching without knowing I was doing it, or that I would ever think about doing it professionally. But it had such an impact. I mean, like, this is, I mean, I guess there's some luck in this, but there's a less than 1% chance that any of those young adults would get the one Google seat a year. And mm-hmm. for the 3 years I worked with the IT students, one of my coaching students got the seat. So I was 100% in my performance on an odds that is less than 1%. Like, it's statistically unbelievable. But I have to say, the biggest thing that all 3 had in common was that we gave them a foundation of good sleep. Mm-hmm. And it comes full circle now because, I'm sure we'll talk about this later about the book that I'm going to release here in the next month or two, is that some of the feedback that I'm getting and some of these early coaching experiences that I'm getting are more than just like, oh, I repaired my broken sleep. No, I'm getting people who are like, whoa, I had enough energy like at work the whole day. And I assumed when I got home, I would just be spent and done. But I got home and I still had energy.
Wow.
And it's like, sleep is the greatest energy hack of all time. Like, it is the Red Bull of energy, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's amazing because when you talk about, like, I know as a teenager, I remember my parents being like, you need to get sleep, you need to sleep. And I could be up for the longest amount of time, either working on an assignment, playing a game, or doing whatever. And then sleep was never really a big priority. I think until I got older, I realized my sleeping habits are not that great. And I know that we've spoken about this before recording, and hopefully this episode you're going to help me see a little bit more as to how important that is.
I'm promising you we will leave you with one new insight into your situation and one tactic that you could use.
Okay.
And don't underestimate it. Like, I was shocked. I worked with a guy from South America, and he had anxiety at night, and he admitted that after sleeping for a few hours, he always woke up. And I hounded him to get him on the phone. And of the things that I gave him, he really only put into place one of them. And I followed up with him and was like, hey, how have you been doing? Like, weeks later. I'm like, and he's like, I'm doing great, blah, blah, blah. I said, well, cool. Now you can give me what you owe me, which is a testimonial on LinkedIn. And I wasn't expecting it, but when I read the testimonial, that's what had happened. It wasn't like, I mean, when I talk to him on the phone, I forget sometimes that for people with really broken sleep, like, it's an emotional issue, and we can get into that later. When I had him on the phone, this is an international publishing sales manager. I immediately was like, oh my God, this guy is suffering, and has been, and like, you could hear it in the tone of his voice when he talked, and you could hear it in the pauses that he took. And I even forgot for a moment, like, oh, this guy's been going for a while and he sounds like he's a shell. And then, like, a month later, he uses a couple things that I worked with him over the phone about, and he's like, everything is different. I'm like, what do you mean? He's just like my whole life is different now. So like, just using one thing routinely, completely, we just hacked his sleep a little bit, and boom, now the guy, he wasn't like, oh yeah, I'm sleeping regularly now. He was like, Nick, like, I have so much energy. And I was like, okay. I really set out to just try to help people repair broken sleep. I wasn't really intending to help you supercharge your energy. But the further that I go and the more of these moments that I have, I have to, like, basically accept and tell people, like, well, part of this process of upgrading your sleep, at least the way that I do it, often leads to, like, really strong energy levels. It's not just like, okay, I get my normal amount of sleep and I feel fine. It's like, there's like a notable energetic difference for that person. And I'm like, oh wow, that's just not where I came. That's not where I came from, So I definitely think that you'll see some people, like, one of my first new clients was totally, it fit this profile that I thought might happen, which is that, and we'll talk about why I use the term sleep fitness, but I thought, I bet you that people who are like trainers, like gym trainers and stuff, I bet you if they hear the term sleep fitness, they'll be like, what is that? Number one. And like, number two, like, I'm fit at everything, like, and they probably already sleep fine, but they're going to be like, No, I want to have like the best quality sleep ever. Like I want to have the biceps and six packs of sleep. And like that was
Yeah.
kind of one of the first like clients that I had when I restarted it as a business,
Hmm. No,
which was
that's
just was funny.
yeah. No, it's amazing because I think we neglect to see. Like we hear about it and we hear all these different things and we hear about the teas, we hear about all the supplements that can really help you go to sleep. But we don't really think that it has an effect on us as deeply as you really think it does. Like I recently started drinking it's like a sleep tea. I tried to find it before we started recording, tried to find the name of it, but it was a tea that's really meant to relax you with like chamomile and lavender and all these other calming elements.
Mm-hmm.
And it has really helped me settle down that and not being on I since the last time we talked, I have not been on my phone before we went to bed, before I've gone to bed. And it has helped. I've put my phone all the way on the other side where it's charging and just left
Yeah.
it there throughout the night,
Yeah.
and it has helped. Along with the tea.
I will openly admit that is still one of my like pain points where I'm like, I don't want to give up certain digital things at a certain hour.
Mhm.
So another sleep coach who we're going to do some work together, he admitted the same thing. And so I was like, there must be an app that will force to turn it off. And so I
Yeah,
actually have an app that like turns it off so I can't get it.
yeah. There's
And
an
like you said,
yeah.
I at this point after testing so many things, I'm like, wow, like no digital after a certain hour definitely has a significant impact on your like mental activity, even though it's music that's playing, even though it's a nice YouTube video, like it's still keeping something active in your mind that's not transitioning to the downstate.
Yeah. No, having quiet actually, I didn't actually realize would help um, quite a lot. And I would love to talk about that even further throughout the show. But before we
Yeah.
get deep dive into it, I'd love to get to know some of your interests and recommendations that you have for us with these little bits of quick fire questions to hopefully get us warmed up.
Okay.
Okay, perfect. So the first one is, what do you like to do in your spare time outside of the work that you do?
What spare time is that? Is my first question.
um, the little bit of moments where you're just doing something for yourself.
Um, like I'm not kidding. It's like what spare time. I think that's like it. It's part of what makes me, part of my job is to find anything that works. So like
Mm-hmm.
some people asked me early on, like, why did you go with the coaching? I'm like, because in coaching, it's like having like a box of tools and you like pull out one and you're like, does this work? No, throw it out. Cool. Does this one work? No, toss it out. Cool. This one does. And it's like, great, let's use it. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know why it works. I have no clue. But
Mm-hmm.
as a coach, I don't have to care why. So, like in the United States, this is a limitation for some sleep centers where they're forced only to use one method.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, yeah, no, I want the whole frontier. Like each person is so different. We're gonna need many different things to sort of help them.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, okay. So spare time, yeah, like I I really enjoy learning.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if I didn't have that enjoyment of learning, I wouldn't have been able to pull off what I did in terms of turning my own sleep around, which we'll return to later. Um, so yeah, to like kind of for fun, I know it sounds crazy, but like for me, a good time is reading nonfiction stuff that has to do with sleep or process or like how do you do things. Um,
Okay.
yeah, it's pretty constant. And then I would say music for sure.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny, like I used to be able to work with music, but now to me it's like a transition thing where it's like I work the day without music, and then once I put the music on, it's like, okay, now we can relax.
Hmm.
Now we can soothe ourselves. So I was used to be a musician, so I would say probably, that I say listening to music, appreciating music, going to a live show, something like that is what I enjoy.
Yeah. Well, that's pretty good. That's a pretty good way to have a little free time for yourself as well, I will say. So,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. So when it comes to books, I know that you're talking about you read a lot of nonfiction. Do you have a certain favorite or maybe a favorite genre that you really like focusing on?
Ooh. Well, I mean, again, like, so I'll give away something that I do with clients. Like when I onboard a new client, I'm like, there's two rules that I have. And the second rule is stop trying to learn about it.
Hmm.
That there's such a load of information online that, I think that there used to be a time in the States where like people start, like when people were like, oh, I can look up these ailments that I have on the web. And then it's like, oh my God, I have this disease. And so
Yeah.
doctors were like, stop looking online. Well, very similarly, that's one of my first things with clients is like, stop trying to learn. Like, that's my responsibility,
Hmm.
because ultimately we win. Like, my victory ultimately is that the person can't remember any of the stuff that we worked on anymore. They can just go to sleep.
Yeah. So it becomes
So
a normal thing
I
for them.
I take on the strange burden
Hmm.
of burrowing through a sleep book once a month, usually.
Hmm.
I usually just to keep steady and sort of constant with it. But I also do it partly for the clients so that they don't have to do it. And I can still, I've narrowed down like maybe 3 or 4 books that I think in the future I'm going to be like, these are required readings
Hmm.
for the 6-week coaching program that I run. And here's a couple optional ones, and here's one you need to read before you even start to do the work.
Hmm.
But other than that, there's a sense that for us, it's like we are going to customize the learning to you. So after we have a very clear understanding of where you're at with some things we'll talk about under sleep hygiene, um, that will then dictate what that's going to look like for you, which might
Hmm.
mean me grabbing a certain book, or me grabbing a chapter, or me grabbing some research that's like, oh, this is specifically. So like before when we were on with, with Aiden, it's like is like a heavy dreamer,
Yeah.
so if he was a client, I'd probably spend a little more time digging on dreams and vivid dreaming, and then give him specific things for that. Because unlike physical fitness, sleep fitness, it can just vary violently person to person.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I mean, you can go online and AI will tell you, here are the top 8 things that you should do to help you sleep, and like maybe a few of them have something to do with you, but it's very possible that it's just generic information that's been passed on like generation to internet generation.
Yeah. No, I think I'm definitely agreeing with you there. I think there's a lot of people that really do their own research. And I feel like there's a fear with doing your own research into it as well, because there's so many things that out there that really contradict each other. I found, at least when it comes to the time that we should be sleeping, is always really contradictory. And I know we'll get into that throughout the show as well, and sort
No,
of
but
talk about the
you're right. Like that's
yeah.
been a long debate, and you'll have one author with a PhD who's like, it's this, and then someone
Yeah.
else who's like, no, it's this, and then it's like I had a guy who was a client for a short while who he literally slept 4 hours. It was like 3 or 4 hours, but it was like extremely high quality sleep. Like he had done it for over a decade. He was, but he was starting to get less of it, and so that's why we ended up working together.
Mm-hmm.
But like, he's the only person I've ever met who like literally functions very well on 4 hours of sleep. So to your point, it's like it can really vary depending on who it's for. And you brought it up earlier, the age group is another factor.
Yeah.
You know, I think the article that I pulled for this, like one of the like for teens, it's 8 to 10 hours.
Okay, wow.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
You know,
so it seems like it's not going to happen as well. It doesn't seem realistic for a lot of teenagers, at least teenagers that I've known and I've met. There's a lot of like different situations where it's going to stop the realistic achievement of having 8 to 10 hours sleep.
Yeah. There's been some, and this is something that I hope to get more involved in as time goes on. They've done it in the States, and I think they've done it in Canada a little bit, where they've adjusted the teenage school start time later.
Ooh, okay.
Specifically for what they call circadian rhythms, that a teenager needs to sleep longer into the morning. Yeah. And from what little that I've been able to read about it, it's a huge success. You know, the teens are functioning so much better.
Definitely something that I think needs to be implemented. Not that long ago was I a teen and sort of suffering from the lack of sleep because of so many different extracurriculars as well, just outside of high school, just outside of dealing with 6 to 7 classes a week, a subject. And yeah, it's an insane feat for a child to be able to get 8 to 10 hours sleep and follow that recommendation. It's never going to happen as well, because kids have a life outside of that.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, like take the number of classes that you just said, which is horrifying and scary. And then you got to remember it's going to equate 2-3 hours of homework. So you're going to be up late.
Yep.
And if we're starting school at like 8 in the morning, then you just got 6 hours. Well, that's 2 hours under the minimum. You know, I mean, as I was talking to your tech guy, Aiden, it's like we laughed at the beginning, but it's like he couldn't remember something, or something was confusing to him. And he's like, oh, it's probably because I had bad sleep. And I was like, yeah, it makes you dumber. Like, that's, they don't use that language in the research articles that I read through, but it's like lowers IQ functioning, can't retrieve memories as accurate. You know, you start losing these things.
Well, and to sum it up, that you become dumber because of it. And it does really affect how you function throughout the day-to-day as well, which makes it really difficult. Yeah. Well, I hope that those quick little questions have sort of enlightened us a little bit more into what we're speaking about today. Now, I know that everyone has a very different definition as to what personal development is, and what sort of focusing on and what development is as a whole when it comes to you personally. So how would you go ahead and define to yourself personally what personal development would be?
I think it's changed.
Okay.
I think as a teenager, personal development for me was much more spiritually connected. So as I was talking to your tech guy, as a teenager, I started visiting Zen Buddhist monasteries.
Okay.
So, you know, there was kind of a spiritual aspect of personal development to me. As time has shifted and gone on, those things have kind of separated. And I would say today, personal development for me is more about, you know, what one of my coaches calls, you know, process. Like, what is your daily process? Are you really busy but not effective? Are you prioritizing what's important unless it's urgent? You know, so, you know, those are areas that for me are about personal development, is like, what's the greatest amount of accountability I can take to be the best that I can be for myself and the people around me. And that, for me, that's ongoing. So like I usually am reading 2 or 3 books at a time, one sleep book, one book that's like popular or interesting or something, and then one that deals with process. So I just got off the phone before this with a ghostwriter, and we were talking about basically that very thing, like that was part of what she did. And so it really becomes more about like, how are you being effective, and what is your productivity, and what is your time management. And so that's changed a lot for me, because I think before, to me, everything was urgent. But
Yep.
thanks to personal development people, even who have terrible books. We were laughing about this one book. I can't remember. I think this is awful. I'm going to throw shade at an author who I actually really like. Her name is Gemma. If you have issues with procrastination, for those of you who are watching, there is a terribly tiny book that looks unprofessionally put together on Amazon called Stop Procrastinating in 6 Easy Steps or something, from Gemma Ray. I have no idea why I bought this book. The cover makes no sense. You can hardly read her name. Like, it's like everything is wrong with it. And it was amazing. It like was shattering. I was like, oh my God, this is giving me like major personal development insights into like multiple things like I was just doing the other day. Now I understand it, and like was able to unplug some of that stuff because I came to understand it. But I think ultimately, personal development is about your holistic health. I think that's the best outcome that you can get, and that can be different for other people. Like, some people don't have a hard time with procrastination. I wanted to learn about it and found like, oh, I do that sometimes, like under these certain conditions, and like how can I hedge against that, so like one example that seems small but is like it's the personal development thing, in my opinion, is you come into your sort of like load of work projects, or it could be just one project, and you're just overwhelmed about where to start.
Yeah.
So what do? So one of the personal development, I'd say, hacks, if you will, that I use is a 10-minute one, where I'm like, cool, all we need to do is 10 minutes. If we do 10 minutes, great, because we're not doing anything right now.
Yeah.
And 99% of the time, using this sort of lean in for 10 minutes, an hour goes by, an hour and a half goes by, and I've gone through the parts that before I was like, how am I ever going to get this writing to be clear about this part on change in the brain? And then there it is. So like personal development. So to me, there's no really spiritual aspect of that. There's nothing spiritual about being like, put a timer on for 10 minutes and do the activity that you feel stuck that you can't do.
Yeah.
So I say personal development to me is really is the secular now.
Yeah. No, I think he's definitely right in terms of like the whole idea of everyone has a very different way. Like for me, procrastination is my biggest fault and leaving things pretty much to the last minute, even though I know I have time to do it throughout. Like say for an assignment, currently I've got an assignment that's due Monday. I haven't started it. So I'm leaving that till pretty much the very last few days before I get to do it. Not because I didn't have any chance to do it beforehand, but because I think I felt overwhelmed of how to get it started.
Right.
Yeah. And that was the hardest aspect to really dive into. And now I had to I'm also dyslexic. So also reading through an assignment is like, and interpreting it in a certain way is impossible, especially if it's written by a PhD lecturer who does not know how to talk in the way normal people talk. So I had to get my sister to interpret how it was explained in order for me to really understand what was going on. But now that sort of set in, I know that I could slam it down straight away within like an hour or two. But just the getting started part and trying to understand what it was actually asking was probably the hardest part that made me feel with anxiety that I didn't want to do it. So yeah, I think it's about understanding your strengths as well.
Gamma ray. It's terrible. It's like 25 pages. I'm not kidding.
Okay, I'm going to be looking
And
that up.
I was literally shocked when I when I started the business. I was like, I need to like build a new library.
Yeah.
And so like there were sub issues, and one of them was procrastination. So I ordered a bunch of books on procrastination, which is probably how that happened. But
Okay.
like literally, it's completely unprofessionally put together. And like I was 10 pages in and was like, oh my God, that explains all of that.
Yeah.
And now I understand all of this, which means I don't have to do that anymore. Oh my God, this book is incredible.
So don't judge a book by its cover. Literally, it's the definition.
You can't even read her
now.
name on the cover. When I was on the call with this ghostwriter, we had to like look up the copyright page to figure out what the heck her name was, you know?
Okay. So going on to the next, I know we're talking about sleep hygiene, and
Yeah.
I've Googled what that is. So I've had some idea, but for some people who don't really know what sleep hygiene entails, what does a good sleep hygiene really look like for a lot of individuals?
I think you should kind of answer that question. Because to me, at this point, the internet and AI will just generate 6 to 8 things that it's combed as being the most repeated things.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But it might not apply to a person at all. So you tell me, what did you take away the meaning of sleep hygiene to mean to you?
I think it's not steps, but I think it's a lot of different ways of how to ensure that you're not feeling overwhelmed right before you go to sleep. Like it's like taking care of it's kind of like a night routine, but at the same time it really isn't. It's kind of just very much like making sure that everything is sort of set up where you're not having to stress about certain things when you wake up in the morning. Like, for example, I think one of them was making sure the room is quiet, making sure that everything in your room is sort of in a place where you don't have to really think about things that you have to deal with later on. So it's like having that space where everything is separated and making sure that you have that environment that's a little bit more comforting rather than awakening, I think.
Yeah, no, I that makes sense. This woman who's an interior designer was reaching out to me and has all these questions, and I said, she's like, I'm designing a new apartment for some super wealthy guy, and
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, oh, are you including sleep in the design process?
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, well, what would I be including? And I said, well, you might be surprised, but like if you could design a space for sleep, you would, one, make it as small as possible so that there was never any temptation to use it for anything else other than sleep. So small. There shouldn't be like 2 huge chairs that you can like sit and read and drink your tea or your evening wine or whatever. Like, no, like it should be small. You shouldn't be going into your bedroom that much ever. And then second, I said, whereas normally it's like, we need exposed light and windows. If you can design and locate the bedroom to be tight and small, but have enough space for like a wardrobe, also see what you can do about limiting its exposure to light, because you're going to sleep so much better in the darkness.
Mm-hmm.
And so those are challenges that like people who do her kind of work are going to have to deal with, which is like, clients want a big bedroom. Clients want beautiful big windows. And it's like, yeah, but it's not putting the odds in your favor sleep wise.
I think we sort of focus on the the aesthetic of the place as well. We sort of make sure that everything is laid out, especially a lot of the videos that I sort of see when it comes to people's bedrooms and a lot of the layout that they have. It's like, it's exactly like you said. They want to make sure that it's big, that they have couches in the bedroom as well, that
Right.
they have the big
Yeah.
windows and all of those
Yeah.
things. And it's
Yeah.
just like, well, what are you going to use that for? Is that it pretty much feels like a staging area for a lot of people
Right.
who are on YouTube and do have videos to put out. It becomes like a staging area for them to wake up and do a day in the life kind of video. But then it's like, okay, but it has every sort of different light that's available. It has either fairy lights and all these other things that can really keep you up, that really don't have any effect other than it looks pretty.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I always find it very interesting.
Lighting is one, again, this is not one that's going to show up on the sleep hygiene search, is lighting. Like, we already now know that, like, the light that's shining on my face right now is reducing my body's release of melatonin, which is making me stay awake. So as I was talking to Aiden before you and I got on, over time, I developed my home into a sort of sleep design space, from the pillows on the beds to the lighting that exists. So in the main living areas, it's dominantly red lighting. There's no white or blue light coming through.
Okay. So what's the separation between the colored lights with the blue light and the red light?
They basically figured out that, like, white light has like an infused element of blue in it. And this is the light that naturally we would get from the sun. And it gets read through the eye. And then that gets triggered to release what is called cortisol, which is basically that quick little morning like energy that you have.
Yeah.
That's the body's cortisol. There's a lot of supplements from sort of new age personal development or chiropractors or wellness people, and with their supplements and whatnot. And there's a lot of them that are like anti-cortisol. And it's like, no, cortisol actually plays a very important role in your daytime life. So actually, I'm working with a woman right now who, she might be the toughest case I've ever had. But like, one of the first things we're doing is that she lives in Australia too, is that wherever she is, doesn't matter which side of the street she's on, it doesn't get sunlight in the morning.
Oh.
So that's where we introduce what some of you who are tuned in might not know, are that there are specialized lights that come in 10,000 lux amounts. In fact, we'll blow up this visual. That's 10,000 lux hitting you right in the face. The research is pretty clear. Like, if you expose yourself to that for about 30 minutes or so, having it come into the side of your eye during the morning and during the day, you get a few benefits. One is it dispels seasonal depression or mood issues.
Yeah.
And two, it keeps you more focused and makes you more alert.
Okay. So that's why sunlight is good when in like study areas and when you're studying, because it sort of keeps you a bit more awake, but it doesn't help when you're sleeping and trying to calm down.
Nope, not at all.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when it comes to sleep as well, and especially sleep hygiene, especially that's what we're talking about today, what are some common misconceptions that you sort of want to go through with our audience today?
Yeah, sure. I think the only other thing I would say, we should come back to what we mean by sleep hygiene, because I want to unpack what, from my world, it really should be called, and then how we define it smoother. But we can jump ahead. Like, just grab my note. Common misconceptions. So So let's just talk about what healthy sleep is first.
Okay.
Like core basic healthy sleep, because again, like you said, you looked up sleep hygiene, there's all these different things, and it's like, well, what is healthy sleep? Okay, it's very simple. It's three things. It's, are you getting the right number of hours? Right? Are you sleeping long enough?
Mm-hmm.
Is the quality of that sleep high? Are you getting deep sleep that recovers you? Are you getting REM sleep that helps with memory that Aiden can't remember anything with?
Yeah.
And then lastly, what I would call sleep efficiency, which is the amount of time, the total amount of time you spend in bed
Mm-hmm.
and the amount of time that you slept in it.
Okay.
So you want to be falling asleep in like 10 minutes. And you really, in the research, this might be again one of these like, oh, this is a surprise. Hanging in bed longer than 8 hours does not correlate well with anything other than, it's not a cause, it's just correlated somehow, depression. Which, I don't know about you, but a lot of people in the States, when they have real depression, like they're ready to kill themselves. Like, it's so bad.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't want to expose yourself. So having great sleep efficiency and making sure that you're like aware of that as a metric
Mm-hmm.
is the third and sort of like last foundational piece, is like, am I getting out of bed? Because the truth is, the final hour or so of you being in bed, sleep, it's
Yeah.
over. That's just your body. That's just your body lying there.
Yeah.
Aiden wanted to talk about dreams, and I'm like, one of my theories about dreams is that it's just trying to keep your attention from waking up yet, because it wants to rest the body for a longer period of time.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah. So, anyways,
Okay.
one, and why don't we just go over what that answer is, what the number of hours of sleep is?
Yeah, sure. Let's
Let,
go
let's
for it.
let's give people what the answer is. So what happened is actually kind of a funny story. You were talking about how the PhDs and their writing, and it's like
Yeah.
incomprehensible. So I did a little time in a PhD program, and then found out, like, this is not what I want to be doing. I got to get out of here.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it did teach me to be able to read that stuff. So that's one of those things that, as a sleep coach, it's a great tool to have, because I can go into the really like dry as a bone research and actually read it.
Yeah.
And so there was a journal. So in the States, this academically in the States, basically, if you're going to become a professor, you have to publish in a journal that no one reads, that costs $100 to $300 to $400 to $500 a year, and has 4 publications in that year. Well, one
Mm-hmm.
is called Sleep, and no one reads it. And after, I spent too much money on it, and so after a year, I was like, I'm not renewing. I don't know if they do this in Australia, but in the States, they'll send you another one. They're like, Dina, don't you, but look at this, isn't it great? And
Yeah.
sometimes they'll send you just one more to be like, are you sure you don't want to like sign up again? It's so tasty. And so I remember literally staying there with my mother, and I'm like, Mom, why are they sending me this? Why are they sending me this? And then, because I have some PhD time, what I would do is flip through them, looking for what the sample size or the population size of the study was.
Mm-hmm.
So if it was big, I'd pause and be like, well, whatever they were testing, that's a big enough number of people that whatever they came to conclude, there's a good chance that it's got some validity and some truth to it. And
Mm-hmm.
so before throwing it out, I'm like just whipping through it page after page. And I hit one of the last publications, which had a sample size of over 400,000 people
Wow.
internationally. I was like, stop everything. I'm not subscribing again, but I am going to keep this article. And so one of the things that study wanted to focus on traditional treatment of sleep deprivation and insomnia, and what
Mm-hmm.
its long-term effects are. And we should totally talk about it. But a couple cool things came out of the rigorous sort of data crunching and all the sort of data analysis, it kicked out what was the minimum and maximum sleep for people in your age and my age and up until they're elderly. So there is a
Wow.
real answer, and it is, well, what are they saying here? Oh, I was like, what? It's a minimum of, no, that's not right. I am against this. Give me a second.
Yep. Oh, good.
This is one here we can edit. Yeah, this study had 484,916 adults. And okay, here we go. Yeah, so it's minimum 6. And then maximum is going to surprise you is 8. So your sweet spot is really like 7.5. It's
Okay.
right around there. But if you're getting less than that, there's a problem. And if you're sleeping more than that often, that study also, that's not the only one, but it's the second big study I've seen where it kicks out that same, like, the data can't tell us that it's causing it, but there is some weird relationship of you lingering in bed after 8 hours and the development of depression. I mean, I have no idea what they've got to do with each other, but that's it. So, I eventually had to train myself because I would be in bed and be like, oh, it feels so good, I should stay in bed like for another hour. And then like I'd hear my own voice being like, it's a useless hour.
Yeah.
Like these last couple hours are useless. Like they're just resting. Like get out of bed now. Go. So right away, people who are, like, what age group did you earlier define?
The 21 to 28, so young adult age group.
Yeah. So I think that group and up to adults, and that's where you want to be, is right around 7 hours, 7.5 hours.
Okay.
And you don't win bonus points for more. Like in the States, people are like, I'll catch up on sleep on the weekend. And unfortunately,
work like that.
it doesn't work like that. Like I wish it did. It would be helpful. And when we get to one of the later questions, I'll tell a funny story about how I had done something with my sleep health that made it so I couldn't get out of bed. I had to like make some changes because I was like, I went from not being able to sleep at all to being like, I can't get out of bed because I just can't stop sleeping. And we'll talk about that. But so that's the definition of number 1. That's what you're looking for. So if you're getting less than that, you want to be doing something to try to get that 7.5 hours of sleep, number wise. And then quality wise, there's tons of trackers out there. I'm sure Australia has like a bunch of products that they sell to you where you can wear it at night and it will tell you, how much types of sleep you get. Do you guys have a lot of these things? The Fitbits and the health trackers and all that stuff?
It's fairly popular here. I don't use it because I don't trust it, and nor do I really believe in it, just mainly because I don't know, I don't use it, so I haven't really seen how it works. But I've heard some people say that it works for them. I just don't really feel like it does a lot for me. I used to have the Fitbit, but I didn't really think that was very helpful, mainly because I didn't wear it as often as I probably should have. So I didn't make the use of it that I could have really leaned into it a little bit, which I didn't do.
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword. You nailed it. I mean, with clients, I want to track at least a week to see, are you getting enough deep sleep? So I think like almost every sleep book, the author feels like I don't know if they have to or like they just want to fill up pages or something. They like need to tell you all the stages of sleep. But really, the big one is I think it's the third stage is deep sleep. And like literally this fluid like washes away membranes out of your brain and like it does all the recharging and stuff. So, if you're not having great sleep, as a sleep coach, I really want to know as soon as possible. Are you sleeping? Like, here's a good example. In the last 6 months, about 6 months ago, I got the first sleep health qualification. I nailed the
Yeah.
7 hours,
Yeah.
and I felt completely unrefreshed. And I was like, why do I feel like trash? And then I looked at the tracker, and it showed that I never entered deep sleep.
Oh.
So you can get the 7 hours, but
Yep.
if you don't get enough deep sleep in there, and as the sleep tech associate of mine from Canada, it always reminds me, like, the REM sleep's important too. I just don't find it as important. That's just me.
Mhm.
But are you getting enough of those things? And so I'd say I'm with you. Most of the trackers, and I've tested some that are over $300, they're nitpicking. You're nitpicking yourself so much.
Yeah.
You're like 22 minutes of stage 3.5, and like that doesn't really help you. So I
Yeah.
grabbed like this $20 one
Mhm.
off of Amazon that came with a free app instead of charging you monthly for it, and it did what I wanted it to do. It would tell me it was more generous, so you felt better about yourself too. Like, the more
Yeah.
expensive it gets, the more penalized you'll feel. If you get a cheap sleep tracker, you'll probably feel better about yourself. And frankly, if you feel better about yourself, you'll sleep better. So, like, who cares? Get the $20 one and
Yeah.
just spend a week and just check to see, and so like this one, I know it can't tell the difference between whether I'm in REM sleep or I'm in deep sleep. It's just putting them together. Who cares? They're
Okay.
both the super important things to know.
Yeah.
So I'd say you definitely want to know if you're getting that deep sleep. And if you're not, then what the plan for you is going to include things that have to do with hacking deep sleep and hacking REM sleep,
Mhm.
right? Till we see that it's showing up. It usually is its biggest in the first 90 minutes of sleep, which is
Mhm.
amazing. Like, most people think that, like,
Yeah.
oh, it's in state, like it's when I get this hour 5.5, and it's like, no, the most important stuff happens like in the first 90 minutes. That's when you'll have the most deep sleep, and then it
Yeah.
should get smaller as time goes on. And so we can talk about how you hack deep sleep if you want at some point. It's not terribly difficult. And then the last one being the efficiency part. Some people are more liberal than me. They're like, you can be in bed for 20 minutes. For me, you're inefficient if it's taking you more than 10 minutes to fall asleep
Okay.
and getting out. So for me, in clients that I have, I'm like, I want to see you at 90-95%. So you have slept 95% of the time that you were in that bed. You know,
Okay.
and
And
when
how
Go ahead.
also, like, how do you know when you have fallen asleep? Because for me, I sort of just fall asleep and don't really notice. Is there a way that you can actually tell that you've fallen asleep? Or because I don't know, like for me personally, when I'm going through that stage of like going to bed, lying in bed, I'm like, either now I'm staring at the ceiling and trying to fall asleep, and suddenly I'm waking up again. Like there's no really way of like differentiating me, how long I've spent lying in bed and how long I've spent asleep.
Yeah, great point. I wish that most of the sleep PhD writers would take a chapter out of what you just said, because
Mhm.
most of them all, even if they're different in their approaches, most of them start with that same question. They're like, we want you to keep a sleep journal that says how long you were awake before you fell asleep. And I'm like, Dina's question holds. How is she supposed to be aware of it? My answer to you is, you're only aware of it if something's gone wrong,
Okay.
right? Like, you've been lying there long enough that you're like, how long have I been lying here? And then you check the clock and you're like, I've been lying here for 40 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's super inefficient. There's a problem. You're not phasing into sleep adequately enough, if that makes
Okay.
sense for you.
Yeah. No, that
Yeah.
does.
And
So
since
how do you So when it comes to that as well, like my biggest thing is probably napping throughout the day. That really, I know that does not help. I've been told that does not help me going to sleep at all. But I think for me, the optimal time where I feel like I'm just really, really tired is probably around like 3 p.m. till about 7 p.m. And then 7 p.m. till about 9 or 10, I'm wide awake.
Yeah, you get a second win. There's
Yeah.
like you hit it right on the spot. It's like between 2 and 3.
Yeah.
That hormone cortisol I was telling you about drops significantly, and it's
Okay.
really sort of a restoration time. So if you have okay to good sleep, there's nothing wrong with naps. I have like 3 books on naps, like right over
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
I would say like a good benchmark is no more than 30 minutes. Like
Okay.
put the alarm on for 30 minutes and then get out, because the problem is if you exceed that amount of time, we should have totally had we should have had your tech in on this, because we were talking.
Yeah, no, 100%. I feel like Aiden had a lot to say. And for those who don't know, and I know I should have said this earlier, but Aiden is our assistant video editor who's always sitting next to me on the studio and always helping out prior. And he was having a huge conversation with Nick about this. And there's so much that's involved in this. And that this probably definitely means we have to come on for a part 2 and
Oh,
we
that'd
can
be
get
great. Yeah.
more involved in it.
Yeah. So I think for you, so the sleep book I'm reading right now is a guy who works from a university. So he, unlike me, is bound to a particular method. It's the only method in the US that's endorsed by the National Health whatever organization.
Yeah.
So I just read it like literally yesterday. He was like, for every client that comes to me who has trouble with their sleep, I tell them cut the naps right out. Because what's happening is that Aiden and I were talking about melatonin, which is a supplement that people take a lot in the United States. It's like, oh, my sleep is bad. I went online and said I should take melatonin. Well, it's totally not that simple. So for any of you,
Yeah.
first of all, he said that there was a time in Australia where you had to get a prescription for it, but it might be more available now. But it's also a hormone. And so people are taking a hormone to try to sleep better. And it's like, it's not really doing what you think it's doing. What you really want melatonin to be is what they call adenosine. And adenosine is what they also refer to in better language. It's called sleep pressure. And the door for that sleep pressure opens the moment you wake up. This is kind of a cool point to get for some people. You start working on your sleep the minute you wake up. And what you do in that first hour of waking up. Some of the people I respect the most in the industry are like, what you do early in the day and during the day has a much bigger impact on what happens to you at night than anything you try to do in the last 3 hours before bed. Period.
Okay.
So if you're having trouble with sleep, Dina, let's just assume you are, and it's bad enough.
Yeah.
It's bad enough.
Yeah.
Then taking a nap is using up and pulling back some of the sleep pressure from adenosine. So that when you get to the nighttime version of you being like, I want to go to sleep now, the sleep pressure isn't so heavy that it's just putting you out in 10 minutes. And it's because you used some of it up during the nap.
Oh, okay. So the fact it will probably feel like I have really slept instead of like rested. I've just actually slept, and it sort of refreshes thinking that it's the next day or thinking that it's a whole new time period that I get to be awake for.
During what? What do you mean when you take a nap?
Yeah. So when taking a nap, like after you wake up, does the body feel like it's just, I know it feels refreshed, but also does it feel like it's sort of faking that it's like a whole new time for you to be awake, which is why you probably stay awake for a little bit longer than you should after.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's like, it's like a baby nighttime. You hit
Okay.
it on the head. Like 3 p.m. is kind of like a soft nighttime. So I would say in your case, we'd want to move from taking naps to things that still give you that downtime of like decompressing,
Hmm.
because the neurochemistry in your body is trying to do that anyways. And so
Okay.
you need to rest. So for some people, a lot of clients, I like to do in this case is to go, instead of taking a nap, get outside for like 20 or 30 minutes and go on a walk.
Okay.
It doesn't require anything for your brain, so your brain can still rest while you're oxygenating yourself and you're refreshing your energy, so that when you come back and it's time to work, you're more alert again. Like
Hmm.
you're good to go. I think the second thing I would say, especially based on some research I recently uncovered, is what your tech and I were talking about, meditation.
Yep.
We could talk about meditation for a whole episode, but the one
Oh
thing
yeah,
I'll the
100%.
one thing I will say about it is that I have this woman who's like literally the most difficult case I've ever had, who's in Australia. I
Hmm.
like sent her this desperate message after I learned that 15 minutes of mindfulness meditation, which is what I specialize in for over 20 years,
Hmm.
it actually, on those little like graphs with the little lines going up and down, it's showing your brain waves.
Okay. Yeah.
It does the slow ones, and the slow ones are deep sleep. So
Okay.
you're getting some deep sleep by doing a mindfulness meditation from 3 to 3:15, or 3:15 to 3:30, or maybe
Hmm.
you walk from 3 to 3:20 and then do your meditation for 15 minutes. This is actually why I actually personally, and to clients, have told them stop meditating in the morning, because the natural release of cortisol, you're kind of suppressing it when it wants
Yeah.
to be energetic, it wants to be alive, it needs to engage, it needs to be out and about, and
Hmm.
then you're actually kind of pressing it down. But if you timed it in that window that you said, between 3 to 3:45 ish,
Yep.
you can actually pick up, like, you're sneaking in some deep sleep without really having to go to sleep.
Okay.
It's amazing. I
Yeah.
mean,
So it's kind of the
it's
best time.
incredible.
Yeah. So it's kind of feels like it's the best time to like refresh, but in a way, for example, like if people find reading a book relaxing, like go read a book or read something outside that still allows them to know that they're still awake, but they're not having to do any hard hitting things that will take a lot more energy to do and then just refresh for a little bit.
Yeah, and I would say, like, to be a stickler and be annoying, if you said to me, yeah, what I'm going to do is go outside and read, I would tell you, do not read nonfiction,
Yeah.
because your
Okay.
brain only has so much cognitive energy a day and you're using it up. So there
Hmm.
you are on a break using it up. Nonfiction, on the other hand, has been shown in research to be a great outlet for increasing empathy. And guess what? Some great research on empathy and compassion and its relationship to sleep was released.
Hmm.
And people who test higher on empathy and compassion sleep significantly better than those who scored lower.
Yeah.
And then they
Okay.
followed up with the same group 11 years later. And again, the same people who tested high on empathy also slept better. So, one of the things you can do to improve your empathy is actually to read nonfiction books.
Okay. Great. Now I have to find a whole new genre. To
Yeah.
find an interest in a whole new genre.
Yes. And a lot of sleep experts will tell you too, like, you can read nonfiction at night before bed.
Hmm.
Even though it's mentally stimulating, the fact that you're getting into other people's perspective is increasing your empathy, and they don't know why. Who cares? This is why I like being a coach. I don't have to care why. I just know that it works, you
Okay.
know? So it's like, let's figure out all the ways that you could increase your empathy. If it means you could, like, there's a doorway.
Yeah.
Like that could be the Dina doorway is like one of the significant parts of her plan is to hijack how. So do you know what the hormone is for this, for empathy and compassion?
No.
It's oxytocin.
Okay.
So when I was preparing for this other podcast, I was like, yeah, I'll bring you some stuff that you've never heard before. And that was one of them, is I was like, okay, this is how I work. We identify that if you're more empathetic, you'll sleep better. Okay, so what's the hormone? It's oxytocin. Okay, how do we hack oxytocin? So I just full out research as many things on what are things that increase oxytocin. Some things are like holding a hug for 90 seconds. Even if you don't like the person, your body still releases oxytocin and you will sleep better, which is strange.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
So, right? It's very strange. And one of the other top ones is reading nonfiction.
Okay. No,
Yeah.
it's really, that should be a whole element of a podcast topic that we have you on for again, when it comes to empathy and sleep and finding that and looking into that, because that sounds like a whole new different area that I don't think we've had on the show at all, or had I've ever never heard of it as well. So it'll be really interesting to sort of do a deep dive into that even further.
Yeah. Let me ask, before we move on, let me ask a question there, because this is, kind of part of how I also got involved is in the United States. I don't think it's no shocker to you, but for the last, 20 years or so, the increase in division and separateness and judgmentalness, violence, paranoia, aggression has all just blown up high. Like, to say that we're the United States at this point is a joke.
Mm-hmm.
We're not united anymore. There was a time where it was like, oh, like when I was a kid, it was like, cool, the states govern themselves and we have our own autonomy. And then we're aware that if we work as a bigger organization, we can also serve social goods in different ways that are much bigger. That's gone.
Mm-hmm.
And so before I got on tonight, I wanted to look up to see how much of your population in Australia is sleep deprived or has sleep issues.
Yeah.
So depending on who's defining it and depending on how they're defining it, the two things I walked away with is it's likely 1 in 4 people.
Mm-hmm.
So that means like here it's 1 in 3. So someone around you is not sleeping well. And then most of the numbers, I was pretty shocked, are right around 50%. So I'd love to know if any of what you guys have seen in the insanity of the United States separating itself over the last 20 years also has happened some in Australia, or no, like you guys are just lovely dovely, everyone gets along on all political parties and everyone holds hands and sings songs about rainbows.
I would have to say that not everyone gets along. I don't think, especially politically, like I'm not that big on politics, so I wouldn't know, but I wouldn't know on the deep dive to it. But I don't think that I have seen everyone get along, but also it hasn't gotten to the extreme that the United States has gotten. And I definitely have seen it. I think I've seen it more in terms of the different age groups as well. Like the different age groups that's in political parties definitely have created conflict. So the older generation and the younger generation having two different minds as to how society in Australia should be run. But it's definitely not to a point where they've lost the respect for each other.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's a question I raise, especially in podcasts with people, and it depends on, again, where you're from and what's going on, is just like, if almost half your population is, you can call broken sleep an illness, and it's a mental illness. You've got about half of your population with a mental illness. How could that not be playing a part in this rise of paranoia and fractionism and all these things that we know happen to the individual? How does that play out collectively, So yes, we could do a whole podcast on society and sleep. It's hugely important. I mean, it's like one of the things that drives me. I'll give you a scary example here is that in the book that I'm releasing, it should be this month, but maybe next month, but it should be timed around hopefully when this is released. One of the chapters comes clean that in the US and Canada, we have the same, regulating body. The number of hours that a doctor gets in medical school for sleep it's most of the time it's like 4 hours.
Yeah.
And half of it's on what they call sleep apnea, which I'm glad that they go over that. But like, the doctors are literally not getting educated about all the various things you could do for sleep and what the problems of sleep are.
Okay.
So when it comes to sleep in society, there's a spot that I'm like, with enough social pressure, could we not get that regulating body to go, okay, now it's 8 hours. Now it's 12 hours and it must include depression. Because as I was saying to Aiden before, you go to your medical professional in the United States and they hand you antidepressants without even, you're not like, I'm depressed. You're just like, I'm not sleeping. They're like, here's some antidepressants. And then here's some Ambien, which I think we figured out is not sold in Australia. And we told some crazy stories about Ambien. So that's a good thing. In short, it really only gets you like 3.5 hours of sleep. So the vast majority of people who go to doctors in the United States go to complain about sleep. And it might be the most undereducated aspect of a doctor's ability is sleep. They're just like, here's antidepressants because I saw the original doctor at this office. That's what he always did. And then they gave him Ambien. So that's what we do. I got treated with Ambien 3 times during my crazy nightmare story that we'll get to here shortly. So that's an area where I'm like, if we changed that, just doubled it to 8 hours.
Yeah.
That could have like an incredibly positive impact on generations of people going. It's like the opposite of global warming, where it's like we screwed this thing so bad that generations are going to have to deal with it. And it's like, when it comes to sleep and getting us healthy, because we need to be mentally healthy to deal with global warming, first of all.
Exactly.
We're not going to get it if doctors only have to take 4 hours on sleep. Like that has to change,
So I know we're talking a little bit about the story as to how you got into talking about sleep and really coaching about sleep. There also is a kind of a personal journey when it comes to that as well. So if you wouldn't mind sort of sharing a little bit as to how you really got interested in wanting to research a bit about sleep, I would love to hear. I think our audience would also love to hear a little bit about it.
Yeah, absolutely. It goes hand in hand. It's not a story I love telling, but I'm happy to tell it. So I think you introduced me in the beginning as a certified sleep science coach. So for one, there's not many of us that exist. My certification's up on the wall. I think I have a year and then I have to retest. So that's one of the reasons in terms of my own legitimacy that I do this work. But in 2018, and I always say mistakes happen. And I don't know if you would call it negligible, let's call it inaccurate medical counsel and treatment. The result was that I didn't fall asleep for 17 nights in a row. When that happens, your entire life is destroyed. I'm lucky that I had my house, like I was able to keep my house. Destroyed my physical health, my mental health. When people ask me like, what was it like? I'm like, it's like being in an elevator with no floor and you're just free falling the entire time. And so I usually tell clients that happened. And actually, in a bigger book that I was working on, it finally dawned on me, like, oh my God, is there a record for this? I was like, is there a Guinness World Record for sleep study? I'm like, maybe there's some pop culture stuff. And there was 2 people, and it was like around 10 nights, I think. And I'm like, oh, I cleared that out at 17. And then I was totally disappointed to find out that they don't track it anymore, because like decades ago, they were like, this is so bad for people that we're kind of encouraging it. So I'm the unofficial record holder of a person who's stayed awake the longest. And so I just tell people that, because especially when I do a session with someone, is that I don't know what bad sleep feels like for Dina. But I have gone down 17 floors into darkness in what it took me years to find out before any medical professional could tell me. It's called rebound insomnia. And it's when you get taken off a medication cold turkey that might have impacts on sleep. It can cause you to not fall asleep for a week or 2. It's the only sleep disorder that happens in.
Yeah.
And so I spent another 2.5 years be in the hands of medical people and had what they called insomnia. And no one ever taught me how to sleep for 2.5 years. So I tell clients that, so that they know that I'm not one of these academics who's like, oh, I study dreams and I can help you with your sleep. It's like, no, I know how bad it can feel, and then probably a couple more layers to go. And so the nice thing is I don't fear anything that a client has going on for them, because often with people with sleep problems, they don't want to talk about it. I mean, you guys are more open than younger generations are, but the older they get, they, especially men, don't want to talk about it. It's very sensitive. And so I just let them know, like, there's nothing that you're going to tell me that will scare me, you know? And for a lot of them, it's like, oh, cool. This guy knows what it's like to like feel like death.
Yeah.
Excuse me. You know, so that was, it still is a huge motivator. And that connects to the book, which was, someone was like, you should tell a book about your story. And I'm like, but when it comes to sleep, it's like everyone's story is so different, and that's why, we were hoping to do a little Dina session, because things that we left you with are potentially nothing that we would have left Aiden with, completely different. So the book is different and new in several different ways. And one way is that I basically was working on like a Lord of the Rings scope book, and my friend died of sleep apnea before I could get words in front of him that I thought could help him with his insomnia and depression and whatnot. And so I just basically asked myself, okay, you've researched this for 4 years, you lived it for 2.5. If God came down and said, like, good job, you did great, you're heading with me in 2 weeks, wrap everything up, I was like, what would be the top 10 things about sleep that I would want my friends, family, and clients to know? So the book is those 10 things, those 10 chapters. And what's cool about it is it's short. It's like around 250 pages. I vowed not to do one of those hyper academic version books. So it's very like readable. And then it also has this cool function that you've probably seen online, which is it gives reading length. So every section will tell you, oh, this will take 2.5 minutes to read.
Yeah.
So if the Australian folks are as busy and chaotic as we are here in the States, you'll like having the book, you're traveling, through the airports, or, or even at home. You'll know, like, oh, I have 2.5 minutes. I can totally read that. That would be fine. So yeah. And there are I think it's safe to say that myself and another guy, we're sort of the black sheep of the family. The chapter I gave you and that you are free to share with your audience, there is no other sleep book that says that. Which I'll just be open with it. The title is you have been designed to stay awake for days.
Yeah. No, I read a little bit. I did read a little bit of it. I haven't really got a chance to read the whole thing, but I did read a little bit, and it is really interesting. It's really eye-opening as to how in depth someone's experience can be, and sort of talking about and looking into it, and how much we sort of neglect a lot of what we hear quite often. We sort of neglect to take it into account and to really think about it. So I really am excited to read it a little bit more and to know a little bit more about it. And I'm really glad and thankful that you did send over the little excerpt of that, because that chapter does seem like a really interesting part to sort of catch the eye of a reader who's wanting to know a little bit more about it. And yeah, we do have a chapter excerpt as well. If anyone does want to get access to that as well, you can leave a comment down below. You can, if you want to see a little bit of excerpt from it as well, there's access that we can give you, or there's chance that if you want to contact Nick as well, then you can definitely do that, and he can definitely guide you towards us, and we can share around the copy. It's an amazing read. I do recommend it if you guys are interested, even if you're wanting to study sleep or learn more about sleep, or even just someone who's academically wanting to learn more about it. It is a very easy read, and it's really nice to know there is a book there that's not taking all the scientific terms and making sure that we don't have to Google things. It's all pretty much straightforward. And I do love the addition of the time that it would take to read as well. That makes it so much easier to know, okay, yeah, I have that amount of time to read it.
Yeah, I don't know why people aren't doing that. It seems like a friendly thing to do for the reader.
Yes.
And the only other thing I'd say about that chapter is, if you have friends or family who struggle with anxiety, it is when clients like really get that chapter and understand it and like can own it mentally, their anxiety drops like 75%, because you've gone from a situation where it's 3 a.m. and you're looking at the clock and you're going, oh my God, something's wrong. And then a couple hours later, you're like, oh my God, I have to get up for work in an hour. Like something is really wrong. So now you're totally panicked. This chapter is so helpful for that type of situation, because you are changing your mindset, which is like, oh no, actually I'm meant to do, like, I'm capable of doing this. This is like, it's not fun. I don't want to do it, but it's a big change to move from there's something wrong to I was designed this way, or I evolved this way, through sort of campfires and having people stand guard and things like that. It's just one of those very obvious, simple things, but it can be really helpful for calming the anxiety. And I'm sure you can't sleep if you're having anxiety. It's impossible. It doesn't work.
Oh yeah. Know that firsthand.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for humoring me for a little while.
No, thank you so much, Nick, for coming on. It was actually amazing talking about this and talking a little bit more about sleep. I definitely would love to have you on for a part 2, and we can hopefully deep dive into maybe use me as a little guinea pig for our viewers who are wanting to know exactly what the sleep coaching looks into and what it focuses on. So we'd love to have you on again.
Definitely.
But if any of our audience would like to know a little bit more about you, or a little bit more about the sleep coaching, is there a website that I can send them to?
Yeah, super simple. It's like sleepfitnesscoach.com. It is launched and there for your delight.
Okay, perfect.
And if you're like sleep deprived, or you just don't want the computer glaring in your face, I had it set to this like a night version. But if you're awake in the day and you're bright and sunny, there's a button you can hit, and there's a daytime version of the whole website visually.
There you go. How easy and helpful is that? That makes it so much better for a lot of people who are looking at it either tonight
sure.
when you're watching it.
Yeah, for
Thank
sure.
you again, Nick, for coming on today and for joining me on this show.
No, I really appreciate it. I think in a way it was terribly frustrating because your tech and I got to all the stuff, but his was totally different than yours.
Yes. We'll deal with mine next episode for sure.
Yeah, no, it would be awesome is to walk through it and sort of tie the piece of, when I said, we're moving away from using the term sleep hygiene to sleep health, and then defining what is sleep health, the number of hours, right? What's the quality, and what's the efficiency? And so it will be fun to sit with you and then break down further what are the three components that make those up. And one of your last questions you gave me about like what you can do for your environment, that's one of those ones where like I am very radically different than most sleep coaches that exist or authors, and it would be fun to talk about.
Yes, no, for sure.
Yeah.
And I mean, you saw my room. You saw exactly what it looks like when it comes to all the different elements that keep me wide awake. But yeah, we'll definitely get into that next episode.
For sure.
So if you guys want to stay tuned for that, definitely do all the things and go and check out Nick's website and go look deeper into it. And I'll see you all in the next episode.
Thanks, Dina.
You've been listening to the Self-Improvement Atlas, the Personal Science Insights podcast produced by LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. For more episodes like these from 10 different life management perspectives, search LMSL on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts so you can get updated on everything we have to offer. We have a wide range of topics readily available for you to check out. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider rating our show, sharing it, and subscribing to our channel as it helps us grow and bring you more quality resources. More of our work can be found on our website at pe.lmsl.net, where you can join our movement. I'm Marie Stella. Thanks for tuning in.